Hello, namaste. Today, I thought it would be really fitting to answer this heartbreaking question I recently received. While I myself have been allowing a lot of deep wounds and a lot of deep grief to come to the surface, to be seen, to be felt, and ultimately to be healed into the light of grace, of love. And so if you're having a really light and, expansive day, this might not be the video for you. But if you yourself are experiencing some deep grief, a lot of pain, a lot of trauma is coming to the surface, a lot of confusing and powerful emotions and feelings, then this will probably be a good place for you to be. The question I received goes, my father hit me and I haven't felt normal since then. And I just want to stop there and say that is a very reasonable response to being hit by your father, by a parent. When our space is violated with violence, when we're helpless and defenseless by someone that, we are supposed to be able to trust with our life, then it's a very normal response to not feel quite right after that. That experience that lodges into our body, and it can just kind of be stuck there, and it can just kind of really breed this feeling of not feeling safe in the world, not feeling safe in your body, not trusting this experience, this human experience. So whenever we experience violence at the hands of our parents, any type of violence, that can be a lot to deal with on a psychological and emotional level. And so it's not okay that your father hit you. It's not okay that you had to have that experience. On a human level, that's just not okay. But it is okay for you to not feel right after it, to not be able to kind of process what just happened. That's a lot for the nervous system. That's just a lot for our humanity to endure. And it's so brave of you to come forward and to share your heart in the way that you have. And that's the first step of healing, is just being brave enough to share that you don't feel okay, that you had this experience and you don't feel normal after it. And I hope I'm just able to give you assurance that it's okay to not feel normal after something like that. So forgive yourself, first of all, for not feeling normal after being hit by your father. And to know that that's a normal and very reasonable response to that. So if there's any guilt there or any shame about not feeling normal, let's just let go of that. Let's just let that fall away. And let's love the one who was hit. Let's hold the one who was hit. And the next part, you go on to say, I feel so wrong when I want to stab him. And sometimes my feelings come out randomly when I get triggered. And that's another aspect of this I wanted to address, is a lot of times the response by the one who was victimized, the feelings of wanting to exact revenge, can be 10 times more violent than the original offense, than the original violence that came towards the victim. So the victim's response a lot of times is instinctually to be more intense than what the original offense was. And this is just a defense mechanism that we want to make sure it never happens again, And we want to let that one within us who wants to retaliate and who wants revenge and who has hatred and who has intense boiling anger. We want to allow that one to be authentic, and we want to let ourselves feel that anger, let it, like a volcano, just boil up and out of our being. And and we want to give ourselves the freedom to grab a pillow and to scream into it. We want to give ourselves the liberation to let that inner child who is hating right now, who wants to retaliate, we want to give that inner child the freedom to feel those feelings fully, to have those thoughts, to have that expression. We want this anger to move through the body and come out. We want the hatred to come up and out. We really want to be the loving parent that hears this one fully. Hears that you want to hear the part of you fully that wants to retaliate and get revenge and that has this anger. And what I've learned through my own experience is I used to feel guilty and feel ashamed when I'd have those feelings come up. I've covered this in other videos, but my dad and I, we had a pretty tough relationship growing up. And when I started doing the healing work, I started feeling all these intense feelings of hatred towards him, of anger towards him, of graphic, intense things that the inner child wanted to do to him to get revenge for all the pain that I had felt from him growing up. And initially, my response was to feel kind of guilty and ashamed of having those feelings, of having those, those thoughts, those almost fantasies, right? And so I would suppress them. I would say, no, anger is not spiritual. I'm an empath. I'm not supposed to feel hatred towards somebody. And so I would just shove them back in my body, and I would say, no, I wouldn't let the inner child who really hated him for a while, who really wanted to, just do awful things to him. I wouldn't let that inner child be authentic. And I wouldn't let it express. I wasn't willing to hear it in its fullest authenticity of I hate him and I want to do awful things to him and that shouldn't have happened and that was so wrong. And I tried to skip all of that and go to the ultimate spiritual truth of he was just doing the best he could at his level of awareness. He was loving from his level of awareness, which is true, but that's not real if there's all these layers of inner wounds and inner children who haven't been fully heard and haven't had a chance to fully express. So what happened, I realized, was all this anger I felt towards him my whole life that I never felt safe feeling, that I always felt too guilty to let express, that I always felt, like too much inner judgment to scream into a pillow, like to let those thoughts of him, I had this will be, this is going to be very honest and graphic. I had so many thoughts of fuck you towards him. Thoughts that as a child I couldn't express towards him in the moment because it would have gotten me hurt even worse. So as a child I had to shove them back into my body for survival. And I just kept doing that as I grew up. I just kept shoving the anger I felt towards him and other adults, other people, society at large. I just kept shoving those feelings back in my body. And what happened was because that I didn't let that inner child express fully and I didn't let those energies come out of my body, the anger, it turned inwards on me. The anger, it turned inwards on myself. The inner child couldn't scream, what he wanted to scream at my father. I was too embarrassed and, of myself to let myself scream into a pillow or to let myself have the hateful thoughts, have the hateful energies come up and out to feel those. I was honestly too scared of those feelings and thoughts for a long time. So every time they would start to come up, I would just try to put a lid on them. I would try to theorize them away with spiritual concepts. But that's not really healing. And those energies stay in your body. And like I said, eventually they turn inwards on you. And for me, and I feel like you're at a place in your life where because you're so aware at such a young age, you don't have to go through that as much. Maybe you can learn right now that it's healthy to let those come up and out. Because I know for me, when I kept shoving them down, when I kept having shame about the anger I felt towards my dad and other people, and that anger turned around on me, I started to have all kinds of intrusive dark thoughts. I started to really feel powerless and helpless. I started feeling like a numbness and a deadness. And because I was really afraid of those feelings. And so beautiful, you have the consciousness to see in yourself that something awful happened to you. You don't feel right about it. And now the movement is healing that wound. And when you let that anger come up and out, and of course, and let me just be clear, like, this is just my own experiences and what I've learned. I'm not a psychologist. I feel like I should say that. And of course, we don't express our anger at people in a physically violent way. Like the inner child, it might have those fantasies, it might have those thoughts. We do it in a healthy way. We do it in a conscious way. We grab the pillow and we scream into it. We put all of our anger towards our dad. You could put all of your anger that you have towards your dad for hitting you, and you can just let all of it flush into your fist, and you could just feel like you're punching him. You know, you could just get that anger out of your consciousness, and that anger just wants to go. You could just push it, give it all back. You know, let that part of you have that retaliation. And these are things I also learned from my teacher, who she is a trauma somatic healing master. And so I just know how much everything I'm sharing with you truly helps me to empty anger out of my body that I had towards my dad, that I had towards other people. I would sit down and I would write the most hateful, like I would let that inner child, the one who's fantasizing about stabbing your father, let that one sit down and write all its feelings out towards all the feelings it has towards your father. And don't censor this one within you. Don't censor her at all. Let it rip, you know. We all have this inner tiger within us. Even us empaths and light workers and starseeds, we have these inner tigers. And if we don't let it rip, if we just don't let it roar, soon it just becomes overwhelming, and there's just so much. And then it starts to kind of fight back at us. So one thing that I did is I just let myself write this letter to my dad, like let this 4-year-old who was traumatized by my father, I just let him rip in a note. And I let all the feelings of pain, all that, like I was saying earlier, all that fuck you energy, I just let it come out onto the paper. And I didn't censor the child. I didn't censor the wounded one. I let him say whatever he wanted. I let it be as graphic and as just rated R, rated X. You know, I just let it be that intense of a letter, without any judgment about it. Not judging that one who, like you're recognizing, wants to retaliate 10 times harder than the original offense. I just let it come out onto the paper. And then afterwards I took the paper and I just lit it on fire. And just clearing, it's like just a clearing ceremony you can do for yourself to let that inner child have its authentic release. It just needs an authentic release from the event that happened. And you're the parent, you're reparenting this part of you. You're the space that's allowing this part of you to be seen in all its hurt, in all its pain. And in this way, you're teaching this part of you unconditional love. When you let that inner tiger just rip and just let it roar, it just kind of becomes like over time, as you just keep letting it roar and roar. Every time those hateful thoughts come up about your father or anyone else, you just let them come up and out. Anytime anger comes up about your father or anyone else, you just let it come up and out. That inner tiger, it doesn't roar so loud anymore. It just kind of goes, meow. Just like a little meow. Every now and then, meow, that person hurt my feelings, meow. It's not so loud. It's not so overwhelming. The feelings aren't so big. Because you've let it empty out. You've let it empty out through these highly conscious and healthy ways to release that I'm sharing with you. So yeah, and that helps that anger to not be turned inwards. It's just releasing, just letting it out. Seeing that one fully, not feeling guilty about having those feelings, letting them run through your body. And the other thing you'll recognize is when you let anger express fully through your body, when you let yourself feel it fully and you let it come up and out, it transforms into power. Right on the other side of anger is power, your sense of empowerment. You know, when we encounter violence from a parent, we feel so powerless and helpless. And the reason is because we have all this anger that comes up, but we can't express it for our own survival, for our own safety. It's actually a really smart response in the moment when we're a child. But then your job as the higher consciousness, as when you start to awaken like you are, is now you hold this greater space for that part of you so that anger can come up and out. That anger that was suppressed earlier, now it has the space because you're awakened to it and you have the awareness and the strength to feel it and the love to see it. Now it gets to come up and out, and now as it gets a chance to be seen and felt, now you start to step back into your power and you start to feel more normal again, you start to feel safer again. You start to feel your solar plexus start to open up again. You really start to feel in your power. The anger, as it transforms and your solar plexus opens, there's this energy of nobody fucks with me that starts to awaken within you. And so that's the gift and the opportunity here for you, is that you now have the awareness that you can move through, transmute, and transform these energies, these wounds, these traumas that happen to you through no fault of your own. You get to now use them as something that allows you to step into your power and helps you to learn how to transmute and transform energy. You're really becoming such a young energy alchemist through all the pain you've encountered. So there is a beauty to everything that happens on the other side. So I think that kind of covers it. Getting therapy is so important. Find someone who has the space to hear you, to hear everything that needs to be said. And that's the other beautiful way to move these feelings of anger out, is you're already doing it by leaving this comment, being so vulnerable to leave the comment. But another way is sharing with, a really good therapist, someone you connect with on that level who can hold that space for you as you just let those energies empty out. Because when you're speaking the things that happened to you and how they made you feel and the pain you're going through and how much it hurts and the anger you have and the things you want to do to him in response and the guilt and the shame that's there, when you speak these energies, they come out of your body. You're releasing them. I mean, look at my last 5 or 6 videos. This is what I'm doing. I'm releasing these energies from my body when I speak about when I speak to you guys about my pain and my hurt and my grief. And so yes, that's a beautiful impulse, a beautiful instinct that you have. So follow that too. But I feel like this has gone on. I feel like this pretty much covered everything I wanted to say. I got the one last thing I want to tell you as a practical tip is when the feelings feel overwhelming, just go lay on your bed, lay on your back, or lay on the floor. A yoga mat's great. Put one hand on your heart, one hand on your stomach, and just breathe. And every time you breathe in, feel into I love you. Feel into that one who was hit, the wounded one, and just feel into her and say I love you. And every time you exhale, feel into it's okay. So you breathe in, I love you. And you exhale, it's okay. And you're just breathing gently into your heart space or wherever you feel the most pain. I love you. Oh. And then exhaling, it's okay. And you can do this inwardly or you can say it. And this is how we infuse our being with unconditional love. And this is another way we heal when there's overwhelming feeling. Just deep, deep breaths. And this is a beautiful way to rewire and heal the nervous system as well. And this helps actually, our self-esteem, because we're really showing ourselves how much unconditional love there is here. So these are the ways that I move through grief, that I move through feelings, that I move through old traumas and old wounds. And I will say this, to kind of finish this on a beautiful and a high note, is the more I let those parts of my old self, that wounded 4-year-old and 5-year-old, the more I let that kind of like that fuck you energy, that energy that it wants to get back at, like we'll just say my father, that anger, the more I let that come up and out, the more I experience this childlike love for my father again. The more the absolute truth of he was just doing the best he could at the level of awareness he was at. The more the absolute truth of hurt people. I can just see my dad got so hurt by his father, and that's why he passed the hurt on to me. And the absolute truth of it was not my dad's fault starts to come shining through. And this, I start to feel this, and the reason I say it wasn't his fault is just because of all the trauma and pain that was just, in his body. And so this beautiful innocence starts to awaken towards him. So I hope that was helpful. Know that you are being held by the divine. Know that you are being loved very fully by the divine in your awakening process, all of you. Especially when we're going through deep grief, and feeling those wounded parts of us, it's really important to keep in touch with that knowing. I love you all very much. Namaste.